People who have traveled to China, what is your WTF China story? Waiting to use an ATM. Standing about 5 feet behind the person using it like any normal American would. Another person walks up and stands directly behind the guy using it. Then another. Then another. Then another. Nuts to butts. No space between them. I am now 6th in line for the ATM. I visited Shanghai. And I stumbled into the marriage market. Hundreds of elderly parents with flyers with photos and resumes of their unmarried adult children milling about. Trying to arrange matches. It was like seeing the floor of a busy stock exchange. A black friend of mine said that a little Chinese girl came up and licked him because her friends told her that he was made of chocolate. I once had a friend who had traveled to China with her family who told me a story where they were at a cafe one afternoon and were watching the cars on the street nearby. There was a driver of a car who rear-ended a guy on a bicycle and knocked him off. There was a big clamoring around the scene until a crowd of people took a hold of the car driver and the bicycle driver jumped into the car and drove over the foot of the car driver as the crowd held him into place. The bike driver, who just drove over the one guy's foot, got out of the car, thanked the crowd and pushed his bike away. The car driver, who just got his foot ran over, limped back to the car and drove away. Edit. Whoa. This comment sat overnight for me and came out on the other side with only 2 comments calling out misspelled words. I haven't changed the spelling because I was wrong and I don't like revisionist history. I don't know whether to be proud or ashamed of Reddit for either recognizing the misspell and not calling it out or not even recognizing that I didn't spell bicycle or clamoring right. So many. I worked as an IT manager for a college in Nanjing. My boss, who was Chinese, actually probably still is, got his job because he was an excellent table tennis player. He knew nothing about computers, but acted like he did to save face. He also made the same amount per month as me, but within a month was driving a new BMW and was wearing a Rolex. Lots of kickbacks and corruption there. Edited for clarity. Used to travel to China 4x per year for several years for business. Got into taxi to go from bus station in Zhejiang to hotel. Right after picking us up, the taxi driver stops and lets in a policeman in the front seat. They proceed to discuss how much it would cost to get the driver's friend out of police detention. Policeman calls his supervisor at the police station to negotiate the bribe amount, while getting a finder's fee himself for facilitating the transaction. Wasn't surprised by the corruption but rather by how open it was. Since I am ethnically Chinese, they probably thought I was a local and can be ignored. I am a very normal looking female American. Dirty blonde hair. Blue eyes. 5'5". When I was in Beijing people kept walking up behind me and then their friend would take a picture of us. At first I was like what the FCK is going on? Then I finally got someone to tell me that a lot of Beijing tourists are people from the country making a big trip to the city and have never seen a white person in real life. So after that when someone would try to sneak up behind me I would just smile and use some sort of sign language to say let's just take the picture together. So there are about 20 random Chinese country people with pictures of me like we are best friends at random spots around Beijing. I traveled to China this past May, and I was shocked at the amount of little kids who don't wear diapers, and that they go to the bathroom right in the street or wherever they happen to be. We were in the Forbidden City on a very crowded day, and a little girl squatted down and peed right in the middle of a crowd. Everyone acted like it was normal. And then people proceeded to walk through the puddle. WTF China. We also watched 2 men get into a fist fight in the middle of a crowded street because they had road rage. My teacher points it out like, hey look, those guys are getting into a fight. Like it was some sort of spectacle, haha. Went to a temple just outside of Shanghai and I desperately needed to go to the toilets to piss. I had been to many places in Asia so I wasn't fazed by the squat toilets. But this whole toilet block was something else. It was grotty at FCK. Had a 1-inch pool of water all across the ground and smelled terrible. There were no cubicles. No walls. Nothing. Just 6 or 8 squat toilets on the ground. I don't recall seeing any toilet paper. There were 2 guys shitting. One was reading a newspaper. The other was talking to 2 other guys who were just hanging out directly opposite him smoking cigarettes. They were all deep in conversation while one guy was squatting down laying a nasty shit. He was farting and I could almost hear the turtle's head poking out. The only thing which was unusual for them was the white guy who just walked in. We got enough food to have a filling breakfast for 4 adults with plenty left over for 10 yuan. Or $1.67. I ate an entire pigeon. Including its brain. I had cow lung. Brain. Heart. Kidney. Weirdest dish I think was frog stir fry. This wasn't frog legs. This was just frogs cut in half and stir fried with a lot of Szechuan seasoning. I also had silkworm cocoons. Just living silkworms in the process of metamorphosis that you fry in some sesame oil. They tasted like pre-buttered lobster honestly. To answer the question, the sheer variety of meats was my WTF China moment. I lived in China for a few years several years back. What's so weird is that things that seemed strange at first became so routine that I actually had to rack my brain to think of examples. The one that has always stuck with me was one of my first bus rides. When we went down a slight hill and I felt something warm rush over my feet. I learned the hard way that day that many toddlers don't wear diapers. And just have slits in the crotch of their pants. When they have to go. Be it on the street, in a store, or on a bus. They just crouch down and let it flow. Everyone thought my 14-year-old son was Daniel Radcliffe. Even though he was 5 feet 9 inches with very curly hair. This was when one of the Deathly Hallows movies was playing in Shanghai. And there were posters and stuff up in a lot of places. Every so often. People would walk up to him. Point and yell Harry Potter. Double quote. Anytime you go into a bar in China and there is another white person there you inevitably make eye contact and eventually will talk. I met an Irish dude who had just come in from a more remote part of China. The hotel he stayed at tried to make the Westerners there feel at home for Christmas. It was December. He knew they had it a bit wrong when the Christmas tree in the lobby had a Star of David on top and next to it was Santa being crucified. I traveled to China about a decade ago. Sometime not long before the Olympics. And remember a scene standing in line at the Beijing train station. I remember people on big microphones telling everyone to remain calm. Stand in line. And be civil. I was queuing for a ticket purchase in a ridiculously long line at the ticket booth. In front of me a younger woman tried to sidle her way and cut in line in front of an older woman. The old woman started getting angry at the cutter. They started screaming at each other and out of nowhere the old woman dropped her shopping bags and went into a melee fury on the line cutter. I'll never forget her viciously attacking this lady in a split second. When the crowd decided to intervene the young woman came out of the pile torn to shreds and bleeding all over the place. The old woman just picked up her bags and got right back in line. Went to a mall in Wuxi. And at the top and bottom of all the escalators were these meme faces, Obama, Jackie Chan, various rage cartoons, and Chinese words. My GF informed me that these were signs to watch your step getting on off the escalators as, apparently, lots of people get sucked in and I wish they died. WTF. I've lived in the expat community in China for about 16 years. 10 or so years ago. One of my mom's Scandinavian friends was talking on the phone in her native language. After the person on the other end hung up, they heard a Chinese person on the phone saying next time, please speak English or Chinese. I went when I was little. About 5 or 6. And I barely remember it. But apparently everywhere I went, crowds would surround me and touch my head. Apparently touching blonde hair was good luck or something. I was on exchange at a high school in China and the kids decided to show me this game called Aluba. Aluba? This consisted of the boys in the class ganging up on a single kid and hoisting him in the air whilst spreading his legs apart. They then would run with the kid, still in the air with his legs open, at full speed into the side of a door so the kid would get his balls smashed into oblivion. Weirdest part is there were no hard feelings after. The kid just stood up and acted as if this was just a normal occurrence. Once my hosts took us to a fine dining establishment. Bill for 4 of us, factory wage for 2 months. The intro course was some sort of fermented fish head soup that smelled exactly like shit. You could put a bullet into my head and I wasn't going to put something that smelled that bad in my mouth. One story I have when I was in China was outside a tourist attraction. A woman dressed in a uniform was standing by the entrance telling all the cars that were passing by that you needed to pay money to go to a big part of the attraction. However, that part of the attraction was actually free and the woman wasn't an employee of the attraction at all. She was just a random person who was misinforming people and collecting free money. She was taking advantage of some tourists' lack of knowledge of the attraction. Tour buses and tour guides who knew the attraction was free would just go right past her. I was watching a children's game show in China and when the child won the Final Fantasy I victory theme played. That was on state-run TV. Furthermore, I have to go there for work occasionally to several different cities. I hate it there. It always reminds me of that part in The Matrix when Agent Smith says he can't get over the smell. I feel like the smells linger on me and my stuff even after coming home. People urinating on the sidewalks. Constant hacking and smacking. I even had the unfortunate circumstance to stay at a 5-star hotel that had bed bugs. Seriously. FCK that place. My friend told me a story about his hometown. They're a smaller city that wanted to show some sophistication by introducing pigeons to their city ecosystem, a very European flair. So they imported a bunch of pigeons and set them loose. Unfortunately, not a month later, the city stopped their initiative in shame because the locals managed to capture and eat all of the pigeons they had tried to introduce. The multiple times I saw kids shitting on the sidewalk through their crotchless pants. Most babies have crotchless pants instead of diapers. Also the time in Shanghai where a random family came up to my girlfriend and just inserted their baby into her arms and gathered around to take family pictures with her as she held their baby, without even saying a word to her first. Good God, I could go on and on. Chinese allowing their toddler sons to run around in public and at famous tourist attractions with a shirt and no diaper and pants on. Little guys could go pee and shit wherever they wanted. Best I saw was a guy holding his son out of the window of an Audi A8 and letting him pee onto the sidewalk. I am half Japanese and half Chinese. Apparently some racist sees past the Chinese part and calls me basically the equivalent of fucking Jap girl. Double quote. Bus ride from the city up to the mountains. During the trip I saw 3 people pissing in public outside the bus. One man take a shitty on the sidewalk. And the guy next to me pissed on the floor of the bus and all over his pants. Installing a system at a customer's steel mill. Our Chinese colleague says the mill is very dangerous. Many people die every year. My response. Do you mean in this industry? Or this region? Or, colleague, this factory. Every year. I spend about 60 days in China for work every year. I once watched a lady outside in the rain, sweeping a puddle, with one of those brooms made out of twigs. I watched her for about 5 minutes. Really put life in perspective. Another favorite was when I saw a small child take a dump on the sidewalk. Him and his parents just ignored it and kept walking like nothing happened. Apparently street dumps are not an uncommon thing there. My sister and I took the train from Chengdu to Leshan to see the giant Buddha. We had to use a bathroom when we got on the train and when we arrived the station wasn't completed and there were no bathrooms. After a 25-minute bus ride to the park with the Buddha we were close to bursting. I asked an old lady to direct to the bathroom and when my sister and I arrived there was an old man with a little table selling soap, toilet paper and feminine products set up in front of the facilities. As I walked by, I had soap and TP in my bag. His frail arm shot up and blocked my way. What? I said in Mandarin. He simply held out his hand. I asked how much and he said 5 jiao, which is the equivalent of like 75 cents US. I dig the coin out of my bag, tossed it onto his table and darted in to use the worst restroom I personally visited in China. I came out just as a tour bus of Chinese pulled up. They filed in without interruption. I glared at the old man and said, "Really? Dot?" He simply grinned and shrugged his shoulders. In 2009, the band I was in at the time was flown out to Beijing to play some gigs at a hotel. While there, we decided to be touristy and go to the Great Wall. On our way there, we saw somebody miss their exit on the freeway. But instead of continuing on to the next exit, they stopped their car, put it in reverse, and proceeded to back up on the busy freeway. Was definitely a WTF moment for us. I was staying at a decent hotel in one of China's small cities. One morning I went outside for an early morning stroll around the hotel. Unfortunately, on this particular morning, I came across a fresh pile of human shit next to a bench. Not wanting someone to accidentally step in it, I found a couple hotel employees nearby to alert. He and his fellow underpaid colleague followed my gestures to the crime scene. They continued to follow down my arm and past my pointing finger to the unpleasantness below. Their eyes went wide when they realized what they were dealing with. Then my eyes went wide when I thought the horrible idea of what if they think it was me. It would be pretty hard to explain my story even without a significant language barrier. Being ever resourceful, the two concocted the genius plan to put a newspaper over it and pour water on it. At that point I stopped caring if they thought it was me and decided it was time to leave. Getting a foot massage in one of those parlors. Lady comes in with a little toolbox. Asks something I have no idea what. Guy I'm with says something I don't understand to her. Tells me she will clean my ears. Okay. But this isn't just washing my lobes and giving me an ear rub. Thus lady does all that and then tips my head this way and that. Puts a couple of drops of what smells like camphor in. Then opens up her menstrual kit and goes in. She gets hold of chunks of earwax in my middle ear and works them out. All this time I'm having a cough reflex all over the place, but she keeps going. More and more comes out. Ridiculous amounts. Then a quick flushing. And man, that felt good. Like I was a friggin' newborn. Long story, but my brother and his girlfriend got in an argument with the cab driver. Cab driver kicks my brother and tries to hit his girlfriend. Brother calls cops. They all go to the police station. The Chinese cops plan on letting the cab driver just go with no repercussions. And my brother says so he can just kick people and it's totally okay. And the cops think for a second and come up with a solution. They put my brother in a room alone with the cab driver and told him he could have one free kick to get even. In a park set up before the Beijing Games, some trees from a warmer part of the country had been replanted as part of an ecological exhibit in a local park. Except someone realized the Beijing winters were too cold for the trees to survive. The solution? Smoldering annular coal pits around the base of the trees. Maybe the trees, now thriving by virtue of their tropical microclimates, would cancel out the smog? SMH. In China it's really common to see babies with these pants that are split down the butt, which allow their parents to pick them up and hover them over the ground to pee or poop without actually pulling down the pants. I used to see this on the street quite a bit and it was always a surprise. One time, I was on a train from Guizhou to Kunming and the lady sitting on the seat facing me had a baby. She gets some kind of signal that her infant needs to pee. There are toilets on the train, but this woman pulled a small wastebasket from under the seat, holds her kid above it, and the kid lets loose a stream of urine into the wastebasket. She then pushes the bin back under the seat and it spends the rest of the trip sloshing around. A friend of mine has been a few times. He's in his early 60s. Grey hair. Grey goatee. He had no idea what was in store for him. Immediately after getting off the airplane, and a few times between there and the hotel, he was stopped by people asking to take a picture with him. The next morning he heads out into the city to meet up with a friend and he's still getting stopped every few minutes for a picture. He meets up with his friend and mentions what's been going on, and his friend tells him that Chinese people love Kentucky Fried Chicken and they think he looks like Colonel Sanders. Next trip he decides to grow a full beard. Gets stopped because he looks like Santa. Can't win. I caught a train from Moscow through Almaty and then into Urumqi, Western China, with a few mates. At the border between Kazakhstan and China, the Chinese border guard made a very thorough search of our quarters, followed by about 10 minutes of questioning. After they'd finished questioning the other compartments, 3 of them came back to our compartment and started chatting to us about what we were doing and what Britain was like. Then one added us on Weibo, Chinese Facebook, and his username was Streakin' Scarecrow. If you're out there, Streakin' Scarecrow, you're a top lad. TLDR. We met a scary border guard called Streakin' Scarecrow. He's a top lad. My friend is a 6 feet woman that is 76 years old with blue eyes and a shock of white hair. Apparently 1. Tall women, or people, and 2. Healthy septuagenarians are remarkable enough for mobs to form. She finally figured out that if she stood with arms wide apart, resting them on top of Chinese people's heads, everyone was very pleased. Several times they insisted on using her camera, so she could enjoy the moment later too. 25 mysterious photos of short arms supporting Chinese. Went to China for work around 2010. Had a free Saturday, so I had a cab driver take me to a pet shop in Shanghai. Always try to visit a pet shop in foreign countries. Anyway, a large portion of the pet shop pet market is dozens of older men fighting crickets for money. They trade, sell and breed crickets as well. Also, many of them were wearing this wooden case thing on a piece of string around their necks. I found out that they keep a hibernating beetle in there until it's ready to emerge. I have a friend whose dad is involved in a bunch of different businesses, one of which involves him being a wholesaler of bagels to various schools, colleges, etc. My friend said that they were looking to sell bagels within China, so they went there to set up a stand and see how interested people were in bagels by giving them away. They set up a stand very neatly with bagels as well as a few different spreads, utensils, plates and napkins. A short moment later their stand was swarmed with a huge group of people trying to get one. He said after a mad dash all of the bagels were gone with everything else on the stand left completely untouched. No napkins, plates, or utensils touched. He said there were even people fighting over bagels on the ground. I traveled there a decade ago with my GF at the time, who had absolutely pale skin, brown hair and blue eyes. Sometimes we would just get a crowd of more than a dozen people following us around, mostly women, just staring at her and taking photos. We had a few pregnant women walk up to us and ask my GF to rub their bellies. Chinese people are pretty cool though. I was expecting it to be heartless and unfriendly due to extreme population density and struggles under communism, but people looked out for us and were very helpful. Not a single bad experience of someone being dicks to us. Interesting to see strangers fend off beggars that approached us. I'll go back one day, when the pollution is less. I have been living in Beijing for the last 3 years. I have uncountable WTF China, but will tell you my most recent one. I got paid 2000 RMB to travel to a city an hour away and give a 5-minute speech pretending to be from an American health company. Then got a free amazing lunch and got hammered with the company staff and then took the train back to Beijing. So many of these random jobs are still around in China, where they pay for a white face to make the company seem like it has an international presence. The amount of severely mutilated beggars near the Forbidden City was astonishing. Most of them were missing at least 1 or 2 limbs. Some missing 3. Some of them were blind, deaf, or obvious burn victims. At least half of them were singing karaoke into a microphone plugged into a miniature amp, and the ones without legs would slide around on a skateboard. I saw 6 these people within a 4-block radius. Truly horrifying. Especially when you consider they were most likely hurt on purpose so they could make money begging. I've lived in China for a couple of 6-month stints while my mum was studying, and I have a few stories. The first one that comes to mind is the story of the rat in our apartment. My brother was showering one day when suddenly he started yelling and came running out shouting "Rat! Rat!" followed by said rat that quickly disappeared under a bed. We lived on the university campus. So my mum called the lady in charge of foreign students and was trying to explain that we had a rat in the apartment. What should we do? She thought we had a pet rabbit we wanted to get rid of. After some time we got the message across and a guy came down to the apartment with a large stick patch that he put on the floor in the room. Then we waited. Eventually the rat got stuck on the patch and he went and picked it up. He looked around the room and saw my brother's cricket bat. "Can I borrow that?" "Sure." He takes it downstairs and we just hear this crack and he brings the bat back up to us and says goodbye. There was blood and fur on the bat. My friends and I went to a karaoke place with a liquor store attached. A stabbing had very clearly occurred moments before we got there and there was blood on the floor. They still sold us beers. Also, towards the end of my study abroad program there, we went to some touristy areas near Shanghai and I started taking pictures of the Chinese people that were taking pictures of me. I don't know if this counts as real China, but I was in Hong Kong in 2001. I had awesome Indian food in the loft area of the market. The shop owners were Sikh and spoke Cantonese, Punjabi, and English. The guy was a big dude too. Probably going about 6 feet 3 inches. And 272. There was a squeeze bottle with a label that said America sauce. As it would be. It was ranch dressing. Was over there during the 75th anniversary of the Communist Party and during the Brexit vote. Had been watching Bloomberg and hotel CCTV to stay tuned on the Brexit vote and fallout. Ended up watching CCP propaganda shows quite a lot. Went out with wife's friends who were both CCP members and involved at a city level. I get so fucking smashed on this crap liquor that I'm sure was pure ethanol. I started reciting all the shit I learned from TV about how great the CCP is. The wife couldn't hold back her tears and gave me her party badge and shook my hand. Not sure if I can run for Chinese president yet, but it's on my list. This was 1997. Just before Deng died. I was on a work trip to Hong Kong and got to take a tour of Dongguan, mainland China. Right by HK, including a couple of production lines, VCRs. I think. First one, the bus rolls up to. A dozen or more women in shorts and tight shirts come running out of a barracks-like building towards us. Once they spot that it's a bunch of Westerners in the bus, they turn around and walk back to the barracks. We were told later that these are largely young women from the rural areas who initially came to Dongguan to do factory work, but found out that prostitution paid far better. Apparently, at the time, it was not at all unusual to find brothels set up next to larger factories.